Hi and welcome to this week's edition of the Nasty Nelson podcast, brought to you by Pickleball News Asia. And this week's going to be an interesting one. We are going to be talking about the unspoken problem, or the spoken in private issue, but it's a big issue in Malaysia, which is called the Buaya problem. I hope my pronunciation is correct. And Buayas are what are the description given to DUPR manipulators or sandbaggers who manipulate their DUPR in order to be able to play lower level competitions. But before we get into that, if you like what we do and would like to help us get the word out a little bit wider, please do like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps a lot, and all of us here really do appreciate it a lot as well. So, getting back to the issue at hand, our chief journalist at Pickleball News Asia, Martin, worked for a few weeks actually on a story that went out over the weekend, calling out Weeding Out the Buayas, a deep dive into Malaysia's DUPR sandbagging problem and how it is eroding trust in pickleball tournaments. So, as mentioned earlier, this is a known problem. People do talk about it all the time, but people are kind of also a little scared to expose those who are guilty of doing this, the pickleball, the DUPR sandbagging. So it's kind of like almost like it's a secret that everyone knows. People know who these people are. They continue to play in tournaments below their level, and it's kind of upsetting and corrosive to the whole of the pickleball community, certainly in Malaysia. So let me explain to you a bit more. First of all, what we'll do is in the description below, we'll put a link to the article, because in the article, you'll actually be able to see examples of players who it certainly looks like from the data that we've been able to show have manipulated their DUPR. Now, it's possible we're wrong, but you can take a look for yourself and see whether you reach the same conclusion as us. So, we can't categorically say these people definitely cheated, because we're just looking at data, but that's the conclusion that we've drawn from looking at the data that we've shared in that article. But let me explain what the problem is. Before I do that though, I also chatted with Patrick Lior, who is a tournament organizer and tournament director himself, and just wanted to kind of sanity check if other organizers out there are seeing this problem and aware of this problem. So here's what Patrick had to say about that.
As a tournament organizer, we use DUPR for screening. And yes, we definitely aware that rating manipulations happens. I've seen sandbagging, low reliability, selective match submission, fake DUPR games, and also duplicate accounts. Sometimes the display rating doesn't reflect the actual on-court level of the players.
So I think the really critical thing that Patrick says there is how the DUPR rating doesn't reflect the ability of the players. So let me explain this a little bit more. Particularly in Malaysia, when we look at Asia as a whole, in Malaysia, what we've found is there's been this trend towards many tournaments. So every weekend there are several tournaments that happen. But for tournament organizers, it's much easier to get a larger amount of registrations if they run novice level or under DUPR 3.5. For the more kind of like the higher level categories and open categories, it can be a little bit more difficult to get the players in because there's fewer of them. But hand in hand with that, to attract those players in, the prize money for these lower level of competition, novice, and you would call it intermediate at 3.5 and below, the prize money there has ironically become much higher and much more available than if you're a better standard player. So what's happened is that certain players realize this, and what they do is when their DUPR reaches a point that takes them over a level where they can no longer play in these intermediate or novice categories, they manipulate it back down. And usually you can see that in their DUPR where any typical DUPR rating for any player that's playing normally will always be very gradual, either up or down, very gradual. But what you'll see is, for these players, the ones that are manipulating, typically what will happen is, as they play tournaments and they win prize money, their DUPR goes up very gradually. But when it goes over the point where they can no longer compete in those categories that are lower level, you will see on their DUPR that they'll play on one day a whole load of social games. Very often, they never play any other social games in their DUPR, only at that point where it went over 3.5 or whatever that magic number is. And in that one session, it drops right back down, probably more than a bigger movement than in the previous 2 or 3 months. And it drops down, takes them below the level so they can go straight back into these intermediate competitions where again they win money. And the money's not small. We're seeing people potentially, if we're right, we're seeing people that are, over the course of a year are winning prize money of 10, 15,000 ringgit or more. So it's not insignificant sums that we're talking about. And that's really what's causing this. The issue, I guess, is what do we do about it, and also what really is the impact of this small group of players, or Buayas as they're known, actually doing that. And so I also talked to Patrick, or asked him as well for his view on that question about just kind of like what the impact is. And Patrick told me this.
The impact is serious for honest novice and intermediate players. It demoralizes them and reduces trust in events and ratings. Players even spend time checking opponents' background before joining. Organizers spend far more time filtering and policing than hosting. It also demotivates organizers when unavoidable loopholes allow such player in, yet organizers get blamed for not filtering them out.
So I think that, I think as Patrick put it, it talks about demoralizing those players that are trying to do intermediate and novice level. And I think that's the really sad thing about this, is that people who are of a higher ability are purposely manipulating the system so that they can continue to play against people that are clearly lower ability than them, so that they can win medals and win prize money. And that in itself is, to me anyway, in my view, really not nice. But the flip side is the effect it has on all those players that are genuinely desirous of playing at a novice level competition or intermediate level competition. They do it because they want to have a fair, just competition at their level. And they also generally want to improve and eventually get to the point where if they do really well, they can move up to another level. So it's a testing ground where you don't get daunted, you don't have to go in against professionals, you play against people of the same level, and as you slowly progress, if you're one of the people that do, you move up to the next level. And if you've got people that are significantly better, it's like me trying to play Ben Johns or something like that, the game is pointless and it is demoralizing. And eventually the problem is people stop entering competitions and tournaments if they continually see the same people winning over and over, and they know that it's not fair that that's happening. So on the article that we put on P&A, there was there was a comment from Erica Pungalino, who plays in Malaysia. I actually know Erica. I've even partnered her before. And I feel that she really, really encapsulates what players who are playing the system correctly and not trying to sandbag and cheat the system or manipulate the system. I think she encapsulates it really well. So I'm going to actually read it verbatim. But here's what Erica had to say. She said, as an IFC ACC mindset coach, I tend to look at these situations from a performance perspective rather than an emotional one. Some players seem extremely committed to winning, yet far less committed to discovering how good they actually are. Real athletes don't protect their level, they outgrow it, which is what I was trying to explain before. Choosing to remain in easier divisions is rarely about strategy. More often, it reflects discomfort with uncertainty because stepping up means risking losses, ego, and identity. But that exact discomfort is where performance is built. Winning where you are expected to win is not dominance, it is safety, and safety has never produced great players. Everyone talks about Buayas, frustrations circulate, but mostly in private. Yet silence inevitably lowers the standard of a sporting culture. And that's one of the reasons why we just wanted to highlight the issue, just get it out there and get people talking about it a bit more so that we can do something about it. Everyone talks about it, sporting culture. A mature competitive environment begins when athletes value growth over easy victories and respect over short-term rewards. So maybe sandbagging is not just a technical flaw in a rating system, maybe it's a mindset choice. Because playing below your level doesn't demonstrate superiority, it simply suggests you are not ready to meet your true potential. So perhaps the real question is not whether sandbagging exists, the real question is, what kind of athletes and what kind of community do we want to become? Medals can be collected, respect is earned. So as I said, I think she really puts it very well, and I feel that a lot of players feel exactly the same way as Erica has described there. So I guess the last thing that I want to cover then is what can be done about this. So again, I did speak to Patrick, and I asked him about that as well. From his perspective, what kind of things does he try and do to stop this? And he shared with me some of the initiatives that he's put in place.
To prevent cheats, I don't rely on rating only, but I also do check on their DUPR rating reliability percentage, their DUPR match history, or even up to 1 year back from their first match. I also refer to the past tournaments observation. I do reserve the right to reject any entries that I don't feel appropriate.
Yeah, so Patrick, he's still relying on DUPR to make his decisions, but he's not just relying on looking at the DUPR rating alone. So what he's saying is he's going in deeper and checking even a year back across competitors when he's trying to work out if people are gaming the system, I guess, if you want to call it that. And in the article that Martin wrote, he raised a couple of things. Is this on the tournament directors and tournament organizers to solve the problem? Is it on DUPR to solve the problem? Is it on players themselves to solve the problem? And I think there's a combination of things. And again, this is just my view, but it does come with some experience because I think, as I've mentioned before, the team here does actually organize tournaments, and we've done many large tournaments as well. So for us as tournament organizers, this one is actually quite simple. What we do is we say in our rules that anyone who has podiumed in a novice tournament is not eligible to play in our novice tournament. And anyone who has podiumed in a intermediate tournament, like a 3.5, is not eligible to play in our 3.5 tournament. Now, some players, I can say this because I've experienced it firsthand, just still enter anyway, even though they have podiumed. And it's very difficult for a tournament organizer, amongst everything else that they're doing, to be checking on every single person that comes through. So what we do is, yes, we try and keep an eye on it ourselves. Yes, we try and remember players from tournaments and see if they have podiumed before. But what we also do is, a few weeks before each tournament, we actually release the list of all players in every category. And we push that out to everyone that's playing. And we give them an email address that they can send in alerts to us to say that they feel that a certain player is not meeting the eligibility criteria. As in, someone is entered a novice and they have podiumed on a novice before. We can then go and check that out. And that is not foolproof, but it works pretty well. So it stops a lot of the problems with the tournaments we've done. So then you ask the question, well, why wouldn't all tournament organizers just do something as simple as that? And unfortunately, it comes down to money in a lot of situations, because there's pressure to make sure that you're not losing money when you run a tournament. And if you're strict on not allowing certain people in because of the DUPR rating, because you're not, you're kind of being loose around your eligibility criteria, because if you realize if you're strict, you may struggle to fill all the spots and you don't get as much registration money as you're trying to get. So there's that problem for tournament organizers as well. I think if you look at DUPR, there is probably more they can do. And I've done enough podcasts on DUPR before, so we know it's something they're looking at. But in the meantime, I don't think tournament organizers and players here can kind of wait for DUPR to catch up on this. So there's other things that could be done. I also think that there is really an opportunity for MPA, Malaysia Pickleball Association, to do something here. Because what happened was the community itself tried to deal with this situation. So someone actually set up what they called a Buaya reporting site, where anyone could go and report one of these Buayas, but they made it public. And as a result of that, they had people actually kind of going against them, some of the people that were being reported not happy about it. And so they've actually kind of taken that site down. But I think the idea was not a bad one. And I really think there is a role for MPA to play here, because if MPA had, say, an anonymous reporting site that they could add to their portal that anyone could go into, and by anonymous, I mean when you make the accusation, it's not public, people don't see it. So that means that if you make a mistake or you incorrectly accuse someone, then it's not public and it's not out there. But MPA would see it, and MPA could do the investigation. I'm sure they could even ask tournament organizers to help them do the investigation if they don't have the people. And if they conclude and find that someone is doing this DUPR sandbagging or DUPR manipulation, they could have punitive measures. Maybe it starts with a warning, followed by a small ban, followed by a longer ban. I'm just kind of just brainstorming as I'm talking, but that's the kind of way they could do it. Because MPA are the people that give the letter of support that tournament organizers need in order to actually get a license to run a tournament. So if MPA gave a letter of support, but also when they did so said these players are currently banned for cheating and DUPR manipulation, you cannot allow them into your tournament, that may work. It sounds simple and it's probably more complicated than that, but my point being is it does seem to me that there is a role that MPA may be able to play here. And we will certainly be forwarding all this information and sharing it with MPA in order for them to take a look and see whether or not there is something that they could do to police this. But overall, I think what we've tried to highlight, and hopefully we've done a good job of it today, is what the problem is, what some of the solutions might be, but most importantly, how corrosive it is and unfair and demoralizing it is to the wider community, all of whom talk about who these people are. The names are generally the same names coming up again and again. So we know where the problem is, but it's not just a few, it is quite widespread. And hopefully by being one voice that's sharing more information about this, something can be done so that some more order is restored to the pickleball players in Malaysia, and that they start to gain confidence again in being able to go and play these novice and intermediate tournaments and do so on a footing where they know that's exactly what they're going into, which is exactly what's needed to continue to make the sport as vibrant, healthy, and to continue that camaraderie that we see within the sport. So we really hope that by highlighting this issue, it does help to ultimately resolve it. I think that's it for this week. I hope you've enjoyed what we've covered. If you do, please do like and subscribe. It helps so much and is really appreciated. And if you do have comments and you have got input that you'd like to give, please do put it in the comments section. It could be really helpful, particularly on this particular topic. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.